supplementary question.
Thanks, Last Crawley. We were expecting the Minister for the Environment, actually, but more of that later. On behalf of the three of us are speaking, Deputy Sahi, Deputy O'Brien and myself, on behalf of all the Fianna Fáil Dublin TDs, and in fact, indeed, on behalf of all the Fianna Fáil public representatives in Dublin. As the Minister will know, Dublin Fire Brigade has been providing an ambulance service to the citizens of the city and county since 1898, and that, Minister, is almost 150 years. All firefighters uniquely in the Dublin Fire Brigade are also paramedics, and they rotate between fire and ambulance duties. So this dual role that they have of fire-based emergency medical service is internationally recognised and is also recognised as best practice. It's replicated in cities such as Seattle, New York, Dusseldorf and Frankfurt, etc. And the beauty of it is this. Dublin is recognised as the second in the world after Seattle to have the best survival rates for out-of-hospital cardiac arrest, and this is because of the fire-based emergency medical system, or the EMS. So my colleagues will take the debate up. Thanks.
Deputy High, 1 minute.
I first raised this matter in the Dáil on January 25th, so I stand over the remarks I made on that occasion. Yesterday was St Valentine's Day, the anniversary of the Stardust tragedy in 1981, and I think on that awful night we saw the efficiency and professionalism of the Dublin Fire Brigade and ambulance service at its best. International best practice indicates that combining fire rescue and emergency service greatly improves the response to a crisis, and that was clearly seen in the case of the Stardust tragedy. SIP2 are balloting for strike action at the moment. All the indications are that the go-ahead will be given for strike action. The key issue is that the Dublin Fire Brigade is being starved of resources and support to do its job. The Chief Executive of Dublin City Council wants to transfer the call-taking and dispatching for ambulances to the National Central Control Centre in Tallaght. I oppose this. It's not in the interest of the citizens of Dublin. The expert panel published a report, and I think that is the way forward to deal with this particular issue, and I hope that the Minister here will support that. It's a roadmap on how to deal with the problems, and that report was published in December 2015.
Minister,
look, in the context of the time we have, which is wholly insufficient to deal with this particular item over a number of years, I've certainly been writing to your predecessors. The bottom line is the DFB ambulance and the structure works. It works extremely well, as my colleagues have outlined. What we're really concerned about in Fianna Fáil as a party and the members of the Dublin Fire Brigade are that the removal of the delivery of that service from the DFB. That's why they're so efficient, okay, because they manage it themselves. They're all trained paramedics. Everyone on any of the appliances. We saw it with the terrible bus crash in Dublin. Everyone who's on that rig is a trained paramedic. It works. Dublin City Council and Owen Keegan don't want, they have an issue with funding, that's all it is. The HSE looking to amalgamate this. The DFB complement the HSE ambulance service, and this is not a turf war issue. What I'm asking you to do is to give a commitment here on behalf of the government that there will be no changes to the operation of the DFB ambulance, and pledge and commit to that. And I would ask you to do that and raise it with your senior minister. And I also think Minister Coveney should be here answering this, because he has a big role in this, to tell Owen Keegan to get off the stage and to take his hands off the DFB ambulance.
To thank the three deputies for raising this issue, and to give my apologies for not being Minister Coveney or Harris, but I am taking this on behalf of Minister Harris, who gives his apologies. If there are commitments that I can't give, I'll certainly take your requests back to both ministers. Dublin Fire Brigade provides emergency ambulance services, as you know, in Dublin City Council by arrangement between Dublin City Council and the HSE. The HSE's National Ambulance Service provides some emergency capacity in the Greater Dublin area, as well as non-emergency patient transport, and I want to take this opportunity myself as well to commend the excellent work that is completed, but the people that obviously undertake that work for the Dublin Fire Brigade and the National Ambulance Service. In recent years, 3 comprehensive reviews of our ambulance services have been undertaken: the HICWA review, the independent Lightfoot review of the National Ambulance Service capacity, and the review of Dublin Ambulance Services, which was jointly commissioned by the HSE and Dublin City Council. The capacity review published last year examined overall ambulance resource levels and distribution against demand and activity. facility. The review identifies deficits in ambulance capacity, including in the Dublin area, which will require very significant investment, as the deputies have pointed out, to address. Implementation of the recommendations of the capacity review require a multi-annual programme of phased investment in ambulance manpower, in vehicles and in technology. To this end, increased funding has been made available through or for our ambulance services in the HSE National Service Plan for this year. The HICRA report on ambulance services, which was published in December 2014, highlighted significant public safety issues arising from two ambulance services operating in the same domain. The report identifies concerns around the existence of two separate control and dispatch processes, but it also highlighted the need for greater clinical governance of both services. The HICRA report points very clearly to the need for enhanced integration of service provision in the Greater Dublin area. The Dublin Ambulance Services Review, which was commissioned in 2014, is focused on identifying a service model for the optimal provision of emergency ambulance services and patient care in the Dublin region. This includes service quality, patient safety, capacity and value for money for ambulance services. I want to ensure the House that Minister Harris is fully aware and appreciative of the excellent historical tradition of service provided to the citizens of Dublin by the Dublin Fire Brigade. However, at the same time, it's fully accepted that in the interest of patient safety, we need the DFB and the NAS to have a more coordinated and an integrated approach to service delivery. It's important that we optimise and maximise all available resources and ensure that the citizens of Dublin have the most responsive and the safest ambulance service possible, which I know we all agree on. Minister Harris has not yet received a copy of the final report on the review of the Dublin Ambulance Service, which, as I've mentioned, was commissioned by the Dublin City Council and the HSE. However, to be clear, if any change to the model of service delivery is required, a formal proposal for those changes will have to be submitted to both Minister Harris and the Minister for Housing, Planning, Community and Local Government for their consideration and for their approval. To that end, discussions are taking place between the Department officials at the Department of Health and also the Department of Housing, Planning, Community and Local Government. The departments have requested a joint action plan from the HSE in DCC in relation to service and governance issues. Thank you.
The same order, 1 minute.
So let's go here. I have 7 points to make in 60 seconds. One, Minister, the Dublin Fire Brigade gets 7% of the national ambulance budget, but it actually takes on 40% of the ambulance calls nationally. So it's simple maths. That's the first point. Second point, Dublin City Council actually has the legal authority to run the Dublin Fire Brigade and Ambulance Service. Not necessarily the moral obligation, but I think that obligation has been well established after 150 years. Thirdly, the Fire Emergency Medical Service model is the best model for an urban area, and all expert reports point to that. Fourthly, as Deputy O'Brien pointed out, the dual qualification makes the Dublin Fire Brigade Ambulance Service very efficient on the public purse. Fifthly, the Dublin Fire Brigade is very used to emergencies. They deal with emergencies every day and every hour of every day, so they are never off service. And this isn't a competition with the National Ambulance Service, but Dublin Fire Brigade are never off service. And finally, Minister, as I said, this practice has been well established for 150 years. The reply, actually, particularly in relation to a decision not having been made, is very disheartening. We want to serve notice on the Minister that we are going to continue to press this issue and to continue to highlight it on behalf of Dubliners and on behalf of the National Fire and Ambulance Service.
1 minute.
Yeah, that's Ceann. I mentioned that the Chief Executive of Dublin City Council, Owen Keegan, wants to see a transfer of all call-taking and dispatching for ambulances to the National Central Control Centre in Tallaght. The Dublin Fire Brigade call centre is at Townsend Street. Technology and IT solutions are available to coordinate the ambulance service between Tallaght and Townsend Street. Already the National Ambulance Service has centres in Tallaght and Ballyshannon in County Donegal, so this is possible. Unions and staff must be consulted in relation to this matter. They must be consulted in relation to any proposed changes. So far, everything that has been done in this regard has been done unilaterally. That's no way to do business. The unions and staff must be consulted. Councillors in the local authorities have passed motions along the lines of what we're suggesting here this evening. So, as I mentioned, the Pre-Hospital Emergency Care Services Dublin report was published in 2015, and that's the roadmap to proceed, and I hope Minister and your colleagues will take it on board.
Final from Deputy.
Yeah, Gormaga here. Look, the bottom line is that in the last, and I appreciate you coming in here to give the response, but the second last and third last paragraph in this is effectively written by HSE senior management. You can already read in the answer, the divvy up has already been done. What we're putting you on notice here, Minister, and putting the government on notice, is that Fianna Fáil won't accept these changes. The local authorities won't accept these changes within Dublin. Absolutely. But it's cross-party. Anyone with a brain would understand that if it's working, which it is extremely well, it shouldn't be changed. And the reality of it is that what the combined EMS service, if anything, should be replicated in other cities, in Galway, in Cork, in Limerick. It should be, can be and should be done. So all this is Owen Keegan and Dublin City Council not wanting to fund it. So we need to sort it out, because we won't accept any changes to this. It's a very serious issue for us and for all other parties as well who seem to care about this service. So I would ask you, which I know you will, to take on board the comments that we have raised here on behalf. And finally, just say there's been no consultation with DFB Ambulance themselves, with the Dublin Fire Brigade or their employee representatives. No consultation whatsoever. HSE making the decisions with the Minister, not acceptable at all.
Minister, 2 minutes.
Thank you, Deputies. I'm sure there are many statements that have been made that I'm not going to disagree with, because there has been a fantastic service provided over the last number of years. However, the Deputies must accept best practice when it is put forward, and the reasoning and the objectives behind the review were, firstly, yes, to determine the cost-effective model of provision going forward. We have to ensure optimal value for money for the public purse, but most importantly, to determine the optimum model of ambulance provision which ensures that patients receive the highest standard of emergency response and where the care provided meets all national safety and quality standards, and that is what we must aim to achieve. It is my understanding that the review was originally scheduled for completion back in 2014. However, it wasn't possible to finalise prior to the review of the conclusion of the NES capacity review. Where funding is needed, and as has been given in the response as well, funding has been allocated, and additional funding in this year's service plan has been allocated for our ambulance services through the HSE National Service Plan. So again, this is about best practice. This is ensuring that we have the best service possible for the people who need it, and I'm sure that the Minister, when recommendations are made to him and the report is given to him, that he will discuss this and engage with the relevant bodies before any decision has been taken. So I will certainly bring your comments back to the Minister and raise your concerns with him.
That concludes